Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-kyun. The U.S. Iran ceasefire is increasingly under strain. President Donald Trump has extended the truce, saying it will hold until Iran submits a unified proposal, while the White House denies any fixed deadline. Tehran, however, insists talks are blocked, pointing to the ongoing U.S. naval blockade and what it calls growing mistrust. On the ground, tensions are rising. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has seized multiple vessels and stepped up enforcement in the Strait of Hormuz after a second round of talks collapsed. With both sides digging in, the risk of a military clash is growing too, raising broader questions about the path towards forward diplomacy and the potential impact on the Korean Peninsula and the wider global order. For more on this, we invite Evans Revere, former acting U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs and non-resident senior fellow in the Foreign Policy Program at Brookings, here in the studio with us. A very big welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So, Mr. Revere, let's begin with President Trump's declaration of this indefinite ceasefire. Iran says it's really meaningless under this naval blockade. What is driving this deadlock right now?
Well, I think it's pretty clear, at least to me as a longtime observer of diplomacy and foreign policy and national security matters, that each side wants a deal. Each side wants to bring this to an end for very different reasons. The Iranians are hurting economically. The blockade and the cutoff, basically, of their sea trade out of their ports with the rest of the world is hurting them. It's hurting the economy. It's putting a lot of pressure on them domestically. And there is some potential, I think, that it might lead to domestic unrest. And I think the Iranians are well aware of that. So that's their interest in having some kind of a conclusion to this conflict. For the United States, I think the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the United States also want this to end as quickly as possible. For a number of interesting but rather different reasons. Number one, the primary one, is I think they understand that they have achieved a tactical success against Iran's military and the security elements in Iran. But I think they also realize that they're facing a possible strategic failure in this ongoing campaign. Iran is closer than ever to exercising almost total control over the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military, even though it has achieved all of the stated military objectives, realizes that they can't achieve some of the ultimate objectives that the president sought, such as the destabilization of the regime. They can't do that militarily. Iran is digging in. Iran has a lot of experience fighting long wars and is very patient and is very stubborn. And so the two sides, as you suggested, are stuck. And the Iranians, I think, in order to get this unstuck, are going to have to figure out a way to demonstrate to the United States sincerely, or maybe not so sincerely, that they're prepared to make some concessions on their nuclear program. And for the United States is going to have to figure out a way to either ease or call off the blockade, which would then allow the Iranians to save some face and come back to the table. But I think a deal is possible, difficult but possible. And I think, as I said at the outset, both sides have an interest in bringing this conflict to an end.
Mm-hmm. So concessions would be necessary.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that, President Trump, he repeated that ceasefire extensions, of course, we've seen that. And he said it's, some people say it's really tied to the falling approval rate within America's domestic politics and, of course, the pressure coming from the midterms. How much do you think this America's domestic politics is shaping their Middle East policy?
Oh, I think it's definitely a factor. I mean, if you look at the president's poll numbers, if you look at recent elections that have taken place in the United States, you see support moving away from the president. The midterm elections are not that far away. We have a president who promised economic benefits to the American people. He promised to be the president who ended all of these so-called forever wars. Neither of those two things is happening, and that, I think, is causing some fissures and fractures in his coalition and his support. It's undermining his popular support. The level of support for this military action against Iran in the United States is low and is getting lower. And I think if serious combat were to resume, including the possibility of ground operations, it would go even lower. So I think the domestic political scene is weighing very heavily on the White House right now and is contributing to this desire for the United States to somehow bring this conflict to an end.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to hear because, both sides, they have a same, ultimate same goal to end the conflict.
That doesn't necessarily translate into an easy deal.
Right,
That's the problem.
Definitely. Now, on the tensions, Iran has warned that it could actually use force and has already seized ships in the Strait of Hormuz. How serious do you think would a possibility of a military clash would be over there?
I can't dismiss that possibility. Iran has already used force. The United States has already used force in the Straits. A lot of what we're seeing, I think, is tactical gamesmanship designed to put pressure on the other side and to remind the other side of its capabilities. And we can't dismiss the possibility of conflict, but at this point, I see a lot of this is mostly tactical and designed to put pressure on the other side. There are some potentially major mistakes that could be made. There could be miscalculations by either side. For the United States, as I suggested a moment ago, opening up ground operations in Iran, I think would be a tremendous mistake and would lead to a terrible escalation. For the Iranians to start sinking ships as opposed to just firing at them or seizing them would be another major step. For the Iranians to announce that permanently going forward, they will control the Strait of Hormuz, that's a non-starter for the United States. So there are a lot of ways this could go wrong, but I'm not panicking at this moment, and I'm still hopeful that the two sides have enough incentive to try to strike a deal that will avoid any possible escalation of this conflict.
Right. Speaking of, hopes, President Trump has said that renewed talks could begin as early as this weekend. How do you see negotiations resuming, and what do you think is the minimum to get there?
The two key issues, the issue for the Iranians is, will the United States roll back its blockade and its interception of ships? That's critical for them. It's not only an issue of face, it's a practical issue for them. They feel threatened by that for obvious reasons. For the United States, they need some indication that Iran is prepared to suspend its nuclear-related activities. The longer the better, and the more complete the suspension, the better. That's something that the Iranians have been unwilling to do, or unwilling to do to the degree that Washington wants it. The Iranians are, I believe, never going to give up the right to reprocessing. And in my own view, this war has confirmed for them the importance of actually getting nuclear weapons at some point. So bridging that gap between these two positions and getting each side to make a concession that's big enough to entice the other side to come to the table, but not so big that it gives away a key card. I think that's where we are right now in this very delicate diplomatic game.
Right, very tough negotiations, so we're expecting. But the U.S., it has seized a vessel carrying Iranian oil and pointed to possible Chinese involvement, which is causing a lot of concerns, of course. Do you think this could actually, spread or spill into U.S.-China tensions as well?
There are some who believe that's the case. What's interesting about the Chinese role here is the United States needs the Chinese to fix this problem because of China's relationship, very special relationship with Pakistan, which has been hosting the talks. The Chinese have their own channels to Tehran. China has an interest in getting the oil flowing again, obviously. So China has a role to play in bringing this conflict to a conclusion. And so to the extent that the United States goes after either Chinese vessels or oil that is bound for China, that complicates the equation for China and might lead China to react rather negatively in ways that could undermine the U.S. position. So the United States has to be very careful going forward because, as I said at the outset, China can help the United States fix this problem. But we need to demonstrate to the Chinese that we're not going to sort of make this about them. This ought to remain about Iran and the Iranians.
So we'll really have to look forward to the upcoming summit.
Well, I think something has to happen before that summit.
Definitely. Now, when we turn to the South Korea-U.S. alliance, Mr. Revere, U.S. Forces Korea Commander Javier Brunson says the focus of the USFK is kind of shifting from troop levels to capabilities. How do you see its role evolving?
Well, I think the message from the commander has been a very subtle one, but a very clear one, at least to me, and that is the role of U.S. forces on the peninsula and around the peninsula is changing. There is a shift that's going on. And the shift may result in some downsizing or resizing of our level of troops on the peninsula. It may also involve, and I think will involve, a change in the roles and missions of those forces, perhaps to include a broader regional mission, perhaps in China or Taiwan related contingencies. But I think the message from General Brunson is an important one, and that is whatever happens in those areas, the capabilities that the United States brings to bear to defend the Republic of Korea and to fulfill our alliance obligations, those capabilities will remain even if there are some adjustments in the force levels and the missions. And that's an important message for Korea, of course. It wants to be reassured that there will be no diminishment of the U.S. capabilities that are devoted to defend the ROK.
So they're both focusing on capability and flexibility as well. Now, regarding the OPCON transfer, Mr. Revere, General Brunson mentioned a possible timeline of 2029. What could delay or accelerate that deadline?
Well, for the United States, it has been a very capabilities-focused measure of success. The U.S. believes that only if and when Korea has the range of capabilities that would allow it to take control of its own forces in wartime, that's when the shift should take place, the transfer should take place. There are similar thoughts in the ROK government. However, there's also a political factor here. There's a strong push towards autonomy, autonomous defense. There are elements inside the ROK government who are keenly interested in developing a more autonomous defense capability. And I think there's some potential for gaps to form between the U.S. and the ROK position there. But at the end of the day, if the ROK has achieved the capabilities that the two sides have talked about by 2029 or earlier, then I think the stage has been set for a successful transfer of OPCON.
Let's also broaden our scope a little bit to the border. Of course, North Korea is also a major concern for South Korea as well. It has been escalating in new missile tests, including cluster-capable systems as well. How serious do you see this threat, and what do you think Pyongyang is trying to, what kind of message is it sending, amid this, Middle East situation?
Well, the Middle East has very much to do with this message, and the North Koreans are trying to demonstrate a very obvious point to me, which is we, North Korea, we're not Iran. We have nuclear weapons. We have a nuclear capability. We have sophisticated military capabilities, missile capabilities. We have the ability to cause pain in South Korea, in Japan, in the United States. So, as I might put it in sort of blunt English, don't mess with us is the message here. And so they're demonstrating a whole range of capabilities that could be brought to bear in the event of a conflict here. Not because they want to start a conflict, I think because they're afraid that we might start a conflict, and so they're showing us what their capabilities are. So it's a warning.
A show of force from their side.
Yeah.
Victor Cha, the Korea chair of the CSIS, we are familiar with him.
Oh yeah, an old friend.
He suggests that arms control and not full denuclearization could be more realistic moving forward when it comes to North Korea. Do you think, what do you think of that? And also, do you think that could be an option for reopening U.S.-North Korea dialogue?
I read his recent article very, very carefully. The security and military recommendations that he makes in that article are very good in terms of U.S.-ROK-Japan cooperation to deal with the rising threat of North Korea. I agree with him on those things. I agree with him that the time for us to begin to focus on something other than just denuclearization has arrived. North Korea is a de facto nuclear power. they are not going to give up their nuclear weapons. So the question is, what do we do about that? That's where I start to differ with him. I always ask the question whenever he and others talk about arms control, why should we expect North Korea to be more sincere and serious about an arms control negotiation than they were about a denuclearization negotiation? Why would they be less deceptive in an arms control negotiation than they were in all of those various denuclearization talks we had with them? And ironically, if you read Victor's excellent article in Foreign Affairs, he actually makes those 2 points. And so the fatal flaw, I think, in his argument about arms control is that the reason why arms control is likely not to work and why the North Koreans are likely to cheat is apparent. I mean, this is their experience. And so I think pursuing that course of action, I understand why we would want to try to remove the threat or reduce the threat, but going down that path, I don't know that that's going to do it for the reasons that I have just mentioned, but also reasons that he mentions in his own article.
So it's also about how transparent the arms control agreement would be.
Yeah, but it also involves the fact that by agreeing to an arms control dialogue with North Korea, you are in effect accepting the reality of a permanent nuclear North Korea. And at the same time, he suggests in his article putting some things on the table as inducements for the North Korea deal that would trouble a lot of people here in Korea, like putting elements of the U.S. force posture on the table for negotiation with the North Koreans. That's not going to sit very well with any Korean government. So there's a lot of complications here.
Right, a very complex issue, of course.
Indeed.
So while the tensions on North Korea and, of course, the Middle East, where do you think South Korea's top diplomatic priority should be right now?
Maintaining strong links with the United States, but also with Japan. The recent discussions that took place with those 30 European ambassadors that came here. It's very important for South Korea in this very complicated world to build relationships of trust and confidence and plan together and coordinate together with other similarly minded partners, whether in Asia or in Europe. It's important, I think, for Korea to continue to work on that relationship with Japan. That provides an important foundation for Korea's security, as well as Japan's security, quite frankly. But also, I think Korea needs to understand that the current U.S. government has a very different view about alliances, and it is not as enthusiastic about alliance relationships as every previous U.S. government was, and Korea is going to have to figure out a way to move in these new and very complicated waters very, very carefully as it deals with the reality of a current American government that doesn't have the same perspective on alliance relationships as previous ones. That's a hard piece of homework right there.
Right, it seems very complicated, but just to be clear, so how do you think we should navigate this and strengthen, our alliance with Washington?
Maintain strength, continue to invest in defensive systems, continue to work with the United States to strengthen the ROK's own capabilities, but also work with regional and other partners to develop these partnerships, whether it's in security cooperation, technology cooperation, strategic cooperation. All of that, I think, combined together will help the Republic of Korea steer through these very problematic waters.
Right, so it will depend really on how Seoul navigates this current situation.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Mr. Revere.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.